It used to be you had to stand on the floor and exhaust everything you had, and when you gave up the floor and someone else sought the floor, they had to talk until they finished. You're only allowed to do it a second time. After that, it's over. You vote. Somebody moved for the vote. I propose we bring that back now, immediately. But I also think we're going to have to move to the point where we fundamentally alter the filibuster. The idea that, for example, my Republican friends say that we're going to default on the national debt because they're going to filibuster that and we need 10 Republicans to support us is the most bizarre thing ever heard. I think you're going to see, if it gets pulled again, I think you're going to see an awful lot of Democrats being ready to say, not me, I'm not doing that again. We're going to end the filibuster. But it still is difficult to end the filibuster beyond that. That's another issue.
But are you saying once you get this current agenda passed on spending and social programs that you would be open to fundamentally altering the filibuster or doing away with it? Or doing away with it?
Well, that remains to be seen. Exactly what that means in terms of fundamentally altering it, whether or not we just end the filibuster straight up. There are certain things that are just sacred rights. One's a sacred obligation that we never going to renege on a debt. We're the only nation in the world. We have never, ever reneged on a single debt.
But when it comes to voting rights...
Voting rights is equally as consequential.
When it comes to voting rights, just so I'm clear, though, you would entertain the notion of doing away with the filibuster on that one issue? Is that correct?
And maybe more.
And maybe other issues.
Now, if you're as much of an opponent of the filibuster as I am and want to see legislation actually get passed, then this statement by Biden on the filibuster should be really encouraging. Because without the President of the United States getting involved in this fight and using the bully pulpit of the presidency, there won't be any movement on the filibuster. So the fact that it's now become a talking point from someone whose position on the filibuster has historically been very moderate is not only encouraging, but absolutely needed to happen if we're to expect any change whatsoever. Now, of course, Biden doesn't have the power to reform or eliminate the filibuster himself thanks to the separation of powers, but he'll add his voice to an almost universal chorus of Democrats who are calling for its elimination at best, but a carve-out for voting rights at worst. And by the way, Biden has just as vested an interest in doing away with the filibuster as anyone, because the fact is that it's his agenda that won't get passed unless we get rid of that 60-vote threshold, a threshold that allows the minority to prevent the majority from passing a shred of legislation. But first and foremost is voting rights, because that issue is foundational. It won't matter what we support, from climate change to women's reproductive rights to a living wage to workers' rights to guns reforms, if we don't take care of voting rights first, because if Democrats allow ourselves to be legislated out of government, then we're not going to pass any of those other things anyway, meaning that voting rights is the entire ballgame. And of course, that's not to mention the rest of the Democratic agenda, which for many provisions has the support of 70, 80, 90% of Americans. Right now, Republicans are blocking the Women's Health Protection Act, codifying Roe, which has the support of 3/4 of all Americans. They're blocking universal background checks, which has the support of 90% of Americans. They're blocking the Build Back Better Act, which contains provisions like allowing Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices, which has the support of more than 80% of Americans. On issue after issue, bills that are not only popular, but that Democrats were elected to office with a mandate to pass are languishing in a Senate where Republicans represent only a fraction of the number of Americans that Democrats represent, and yet still they get to dictate the agenda. And for those people like Kyrsten Sinema who fearmonger about how eliminating the filibuster could ultimately hurt Democrats when Republicans take the majority, here's the thing. Think about what Republicans' top priorities are: tax cuts for the rich and confirming conservative judges. The filibuster is already eliminated for both of those. As of 2017, you need only a simple majority to confirm judges, which led to the confirmations of Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett on the Supreme Court. And they passed their 2017 tax cut for the rich with only a simple majority. It's Democrats who are disproportionately hurt by the inability to pass legislation. Republicans benefit from the status quo. Republicans benefit from a tax system that overwhelmingly favors the rich, from having zero federal protections for abortion, from allowing red states to suppress voters of color or other traditionally Democratic voters. Doing nothing helps Republicans. And by the way, they know that. But that won't stop them and people like Kyrsten Sinema from pretending that we shouldn't pass any of our agenda because the threat exists that Republicans Republicans could possibly pass bad laws at some untold point in the future. And so instead, we're supposed to just sit around with our tails between our legs because we're too scared of the prospect of something bad happening. As if something bad isn't already happening. As if states aren't gerrymandering Democrats out of government right now. As if states aren't suppressing the votes of minorities right now. As if states aren't banning abortion right now. As if the ultra-rich aren't paying a fraction of what their secretaries are paying in terms of percentages of their incomes right now. So we can either fix these things today, or we can cower in fear at the prospect of Republicans abusing their power in the future, while also watching them abuse their power at this very second. So look, we're all well aware that there are still holdouts to reforming the filibuster, namely Manchin and Sinema. But we also knew they were never going to just jump on board without going through the process of trying to find Republicans willing to compromise, which we always knew was doomed, but that process still had to play out. And now that it has, and still Republicans aren't willing to lift a finger to actually achieve the bipartisanship that they pretended the filibuster was fostering, now the Joe Manchins and Kyrsten Sinemas and even Joe Bidens have the justification they need to say, we tried. We made the effort over and over and over again to work together. We tried to meet you halfway, but you showed us that you're not interested. Biden's clearly reached that point. Now the goal is for Manchin and Sinema to see another moderate who also defended the filibuster change his stance and recognize that they have the room to do the same. So look, is this process painfully slow? Yes. Are people like me beyond frustrated at the lack of progress, especially given the fact that we're in this rare period of unified control of government, something that we may very well not get back again for another decade? Yes. But given the fact that we need to get every single Democrat on board, we have no choice but to go through these motions. And the fact that we're seeing any movement is a good thing, if for nothing else than the fact that we have no other avenue. So progress might be slow, but just having progress at all means there's still a reason to hold out hope. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.